Hello and welcome to The Point. I'm John Ederola, sitting in today for Miss Anna Kasparian, who's off on vacation having fun in the Southern Hemisphere. But while she's gone, we're going to be also having fun here, because today we're going to be talking about a fun topic, one that's near and dear to my heart, and that is video games and the politics of video games. First, we're going to be talking about sexism and misogyny, both in games and in the surrounding gaming culture. Is it as big of a problem as it appears to be? Then we're going to be turning to the messaging that games relay, the positive messages, the negative messages. They get a lot of bad press, but we're going to look and see if we can find any positive messages coming out of modern games. And then finally, we're going to be turning our eyes to the future, talking about what we expect to see in games in the future, and also who are the people going to be that are going to be designing them, and how we're going to train them to do that. But before we get to those topics, let's turn to our panel. We've assembled a collection of experts and enthusiasts to talk about these topics today. First, we have Mr. Brett Ehrlich. He's a comedian, a writer, a comic genius behind the Brett's Talking segment on the War Room on Current TV. You can also see him on the TYT network, both on Pop Trigger and occasionally on Common Room as well. We also have Kim Horcher. She is an avid gamer and the host of the fabulously popular Nerd Alert program, also on the TYT network. She looks happy to be here as well. We're happy to have you. And we also have an actual expert, Ross Lincoln, an associate editor and contributor to Gamefront, who focuses on politics in gaming, in popular culture. Hi. Happy to have you here as well. Thank you. For our first segment, we're going to be turning to a recent TEDx talk. So this was a clip from a TEDx talk by feminist frequency video blogger and critic Anita Sarkeesian. Let's take a look.
I'd like to share with you a story about how I accidentally became the villain of a massively online game in real life. For the past 4 years, I've been running a video web series on YouTube called Feminist Frequency, where I deconstruct the representations of women in the media. I try to provide the tools to give people the language to talk about sexism and issues of gender using accessible language from popular culture, such as TV shows, movies, comic books, and video games. It is no secret that the video game industry boasts some of the most sexually objectified, stereotyped, and downright oppressive portrayals of women in any medium. So with that in mind, I decided to launch a fundraising campaign on the crowdfunding website Kickstarter, where I would create a series of videos to look specifically at the way women are represented in video games. The idea being that if you were interested in the project, you could donate, and if you weren't interested, you could choose not to donate. It's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah. Turns out that there are a bunch of male gamers out there who were, shall we say, not too excited about this project. Now, I'm a pop culture critic, I am a feminist, and I'm a woman. And I'm all of these things openly on the internet. So I'm no stranger to some level of sexist backlash. I found myself the target of a massive online hate campaign. All of my social media sites were flooded with threats of rape, violence, sexual assault, death. And you'll notice that these threats and comments were all specifically targeting my gender. The Wikipedia article about me was vandalized with sexism, racism, and pornographic images. There was a campaign to report all of my social media accounts, including my Kickstarter, my YouTube, my Twitter, and they would report them as fraud, as spam, even as terrorism, in an effort to get them suspended. They attempted to knock my website offline, hack into my email and other accounts. They attempted to collect and distribute my personal information, including my home address and phone number. There were images made, pornographic images made in my likeness being raped by video game characters and sent to me again and again.
Okay, so of course we had to cut that from the larger TED Talk. If you have the time, the full video will be linked. It's about 10 minutes long, and she goes into greater detail about both her experiences, and also she generates this metaphor of her experience as sort of a villain in a game, which is interesting. Now, we're going to be talking more generally about sexism in gaming and gaming culture, but we're going to be starting with Anita's experience. First question I'm going to send to you, Kim. You've seen the full video. What did you find most surprising about her experience?
Well, the backlash she got, I felt, was, well, I think we can all agree, it was a little much to have her life threatened, to have a game where she's depicted as being raped and beaten. Mm-hmm. It's a little much. I mean, I think that a lot of this goes on untrue, non-fact-based stereotypes that all gamers are misogynists and all feminists hate men, which neither of these are true, neither of them are based in reality, but it's fueled a lot of, I think, anger and hatred and trolling that probably wasn't necessary. I also believe that this is not how the majority of people feel. And maybe these horrible, vitriol-filled voices, maybe they're the loudest to her. I mean, I do get trolled sometimes, and I do remember it, it stings, but there's also a lot of people who have measured responses and reasonable responses, and I don't know how much of this is true feelings and a lot of it, or how much of it is
just trolling.
Just trolling.
Yeah, yeah, and as you point out, she did get a positive response as well. She ended up raising far more money than she expected to. So while there was the vitriol and the hate and the death threats and things like that, she also received a lot of financial support. You look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just think that she definitely didn't make it. She opened herself up as a larger potential target for online bullying than she could have. I think there's a way for her to enter into this whole discussion as like, I did some work ahead of time to find out what this is all about, but when she presents her point of view entering the whole discison, it's like, it's no secret that there's a lot of sexism in online games.
Pretty pretentious,
and it's just like there's like this little voice in my head, and it's just in there. I don't like it, but it was like, shut up, bitch. It was just like, shut the fuck up. But you know, the more I listen to her, I'm like, oh, I get, like, I'm not excusing anyone who was doing that and cyberbullying her, hacking into her email. I think that's way too much. I just think that there's a certain part of it that's like, listen, you didn't even make an attempt ahead of time to ingratiate yourself to this community. Not even ingratiate, but you already, before you went in, admitted to painting them as the villain.
Well, yeah. I think it's safe to make the case, though, that she is a lifelong gamer. I mean, she's in the community. She's not trying to, she's someone who's played video games her entire life and is really interested in the fact, as a woman, and as a white man, I'm obviously uniquely qualified to talk about women's issues, but she's done this her entire life and wanted to explore it, and she's got already a profile as a sort of an online feminist, so I think her pitch for this thing wasn't pretentiousness or like jumping the gun or whatever. It was, I already have some expertise and authority on this issue, and I love games, and I think this is something I'd really love to explore further. Would you like to fund it? I found her Kickstarter pitch really humble. But then you have the thing where I think, like, whenever you criticize, say, the United States after the war on terror really ramped up, and there's this thing where it's like when someone says your organization has a problem, you hear it as, well, I have a problem, and no one's like, I'm not a racist or I'm not a sexist, so people just overreact to that, which is what I think kind of started to happen there.
And the trolls, that's just a problem in itself, because then it gives, it just feeds on itself. So you have, she's kind of, it seems like she's imputing the other side, and the other side has people who aren't representative of the whole, who blow it out of proportion. And then she goes back to this TED Talk, this women's TED Talk, and she says, look at what all these assholes did. And so it happens all the time in media. It's like you turn on anything like Talking Points Memo, and you just find the crazies on the other side, and you make them representative of the whole, when really they're not.
Well, look, everybody at this table puts out content in one form or another that gets criticized from time to time, and nobody wants to receive the negative criticism, the trolling and things like that. But I think that there are actions that definitely stand out. So she talks in the full video about the coordination that she found among her critics, that it wasn't just individual people coming in and posting negative comments, that they were then conspiring in message boards and things like that. I know that when I receive a negative comment, for instance, it's bad enough, but when they'll like put together a compilation video and set music to it, that seems weirder. And she talks in her full video about a video game that's basically just her being punched in the face a bunch of times. And so that seems particularly shocking.
I always get flattered by how much time people put into it. I feel like it is flattering, and I think that's something that she doesn't understand. Yes, it sounds terrible, but really these are people who, I'm sure they have like 4 people they need to troll today, and they put time into.
Do you think that's become kind of a trendy thing to do? Because I'm not saying all gamers are nerds, but you kind of I feel like there should be some level of empathy. Like, I've been painted as targeted before. I've been made to feel like an outcast. Why would I do this to someone else? Is it just more trendy to just jump on someone now if they're a target and show how cool you are by bashing them?
Certainly easier than coming up with it yourself.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to broach this subject a little bit later on. So I think I like that women are trying to get into gaming as a part. They want to be part of the culture. I think that makes sense. And I certainly don't have much sympathy for the people maliciously attacking her and making pornographic images. But I think that we can't forget that for decades now, gamers have been made to feel that they are outcasts. And women in particular, in many cases, have said, why do you have the hobby that you do? Why would you stay at home playing games? Now, not just women, but that's a part of the community. And so now, after decades of being told that you're outcasts and you're weirdos and your hobby doesn't make sense, these people are trying to get in. And so I wonder, is it only natural that people are reacting in a defensive way? Like, you're a gamer. What do you think about that?
Well, actually, my experience, and obviously confirmation bias comes in here, my experience is the majority, or not majority, but a solid, maybe 48% of the people I know in my life that are like hardcore gamers are women. So my best friends growing up have been like, you know, girls at one point, women later when we all grew up. I feel like there's a thing that sort of happened like in the Nintendo era, like the 80s, you know, those games weren't very plot focused. If they were, it was like Fantasy, Zelda, that kind of stuff. They were objective based games. You sort of like, you do the puzzle, you win the end music, and everyone then 20 years later gets drunk and talks about how much they like those games.
Yeah.
As computer processors got more and more powerful and consoles got better, you suddenly had the ability to tell complex stories in games. You guys have to take into account the fact that like STEM subjects, men have always been more traditionally encouraged to go into them, and that includes in a way like video game development, modding community heavily male. So when, in the era when consoles got more powerful, you had more men going into that, they're telling stories that come from their perspective. It became sort of a like self-reinforcing thing where only dudes are going into this at that time period, and the only dude stories are getting told.
They're producing content for dudes.
Right.
You're different than most people, I think. 48% of my friends.
Oh, I said confirmation bias from the start. I
Right,
fully
for
agree.
sure.
Yeah,
So
I fully agree.
I think that kind of threw me from the beginning, because like I just remember even as an 18-year-old or 17, 16-year-old, like staying up all night and playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out with dudes. And I think all the numbers will confirm that.
I'm a fancy lad, I'll admit it. So.
Right, but you're right. But yeah. I just think that most of the time it's guys, and everything else you said confirmed that.
I think there are definitely communities, particular genres where the male domination is stronger than in others. But I know I play League of Legends, and we always have women in our gaming groups. I played Lotro before that, we had women, and I like that that's becoming more common. But speaking of women, Kim, what do you think that women can do, if anything, to try to ease their transition into a permanent and important part of the gaming culture? Do you think that, for instance, her doing a series like this is a good strategy? Do you think that women need to be seen in streams more often? Should there be more like prominent like female games journalists? Like, what can women do to make it easier for themselves?
I don't know that they have to. Well, it's going to be rough, of course. I mean, this Anita is simple enough of that. I don't know that. Because I kind of subscribe to the theory that I don't have to prove myself to anyone. I don't have to meet anyone's test if I'm worthy enough. I should just do what I like and do it the way I want to.
Okay.
I saw there's a thing called Pieces of Ass. It's a show that's been going on for 10 years, and they did one in Los Angeles recently. Sam Shocker from what show am I on? Pop Trigger. She was in it, but Allison Hazlip is a girl who used to do something with G4, and she had this whole discussion about how she, it's basically the vagina monologues, but like raunchier and stuff. And so she said that she had to make a decision when she was in her 20s to kind of, or even younger, to be a guy's girl. And she thought for a long time that she had to make that adjustment to herself, where it was like, I'm going to hang out with the guys, and I think that's what they want. And then she got to a certain point, she's like, no, they don't, they just want a girl. So is there this weird decision that you have to make entering into the gamer world where you kind of have to unsex yourself? And you have to, so I guess the question is like, can you be still a woman, or do you have to be just another one of the guys in order to play?
That's an interesting question. I actually do have an account I play on online that has a more masculine name than my normal account, just because I feel like it's the easiest way to not have to be, treated with like kitty gloves or shamed for being a woman or tits or GTFO.
Yeah, you're
and it's the easiest way to do it. But I feel like I would like to be myself, and it's maybe not at that point yet. Lately, I haven't been making any attempts to masculinize myself, but.
No, you still have long hair and everything.
My instinct is that you shouldn't have to change, and that's the only way you're going to make any. But I think practically, I think you might just have to pretend for a while, and then later be like, I was a chick this whole time.
Surprise!
Okay, so I won't have the actual words, unfortunately, but Aisha Tyler last year, she was one of the main, like, I guess, not VJs, but one of the people doing E3. She was presenting information and all that, and she received a lot of criticism, which I think is funny, because if there's anybody who has nerd cred and gaming cred as a woman, it would seem to be Aisha Tyler. But she got the criticism. People assumed without doing any research research, that she didn't know what she was talking about. And she had an awesome reaction to it, which we'll put up on the screen, where she just talked about how long she'd been gaming and how she'd paid her dues and screw you. And I think that women should take that tact. If they've been playing games for a long time, I don't think that they should be shy about it. They should come out with a picture of them holding a weapon from Gears of War and say, I belong here, this is my community too. I think that we should see more of that in the future.
You don't have to hold a picture of yourself with a, holding a Gears
That's
of
kind
War
of a joke,
gun.
but
Well, what I'm saying is, I feel like there's an expectation for women to have to prove themselves. This goes to the fake geek girl controversy too. There's this comic out there. There's a guy in a Green Lantern shirt, and this guy goes, "Oh, cool, Green Lantern, awesome." And there's a girl in a Green Lantern shirt, and this guy's like, "Do you even know the Green Lantern code? What is the emotional spectrum? Do you know what all the cores are? Tell me!" It's like there's this expectation that you have to prove yourself. You have to qualify yourself before you're allowed to talk. And that's something that is not expected from males.
Right. I will actually disagree with you there. I feel like whenever we talk about games on the common room, people always say, "Oh, John, you don't know anything about games." And I'll be like, "I programmed Missile Command in high school. Don't talk to me about video games."
I just think that it's a higher expectation for a female than for a dude,
definitely,
because you just assume that the guy knows more.
Well, because Aisha Tyler, she's a gorgeous woman, so I think people did kind of take that at face value. Oh, she's faking it. She wants attention.
Yup.
And the female,
I think you can't leave out.
Last point to you, Ross.
Oh, sure.
What do you got for us?
You can't leave out the fact that there's a tremendous resistance to coolness in like all facets of like geek culture. People get mad at you if you suddenly take an interest in your appearance, for instance, or if you suddenly try to learn how to talk to people without being creepy or whatever. And so whenever someone comes along, attractive woman, part of the outrage is like they can't be real because not to insult myself, but because they've bathed recently or whatever. So
yeah, it's funny, but that's also offline too. I know that when I used to go to Magic the Gathering tournaments, if I wore cologne or a nice shirt, people would look at me weird. But unfortunately, while there's so much more we could talk about in this area about misogyny and sexism, both in gaming and gaming culture, we're going to have to stop for now. We're going to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the sorts of messages that games are trying to get across, messages about sex and violence and xenophobia, and maybe other things too. We'll be back shortly.
Rated M for mature.
So that was, of course, a commercial for BioShock Infinite, which came out last month. It was extremely popular, generated a lot of discussion. Now, it wasn't a perfectly realistic depiction of the actual game, both because that scene never actually happened, and she didn't send like money flying at you constantly. But it's an interesting game. It's got the shooting, obviously, but there's a strong message, a strong plot in that particular game. Now, Brett, you've alluded to a message that you want to talk about in regard to BioShock Infinite.
It's BioShock Infinite. It's tough to follow the message it's trying to send you in the game. I think it is a sophisticated discussion that it starts in your mind. At the beginning, you think that BioShock's just going to be about one side's impugning of fuck, hang on, let me start over.
Xenophobia, racism.
Yeah, xenophobia and racism. Basically, this is the allegory is there's a bright shining city on a hill. You think it's going to be a very simple idea that we're upset because the America thinks it's awesome and American exceptionalism takes you to terrible places, and then it starts turning it upside down, and then you realize by the end it's just Inception.
Kind of. Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, so Bioshock Infinite, it has a message. Now, when we talk about messages in video games historically, they get a lot of criticism because they're portrayed as sending the wrong messages to gamers. Messages about violence always being the solution to everything, the portrayal of women, the portrayal of homosexuals, all sorts of things like that. Now, you've covered a lot of games, Ross, over the years. What do you think about the messages that modern games are sending? Do you think it's a venue for positive social, political, or ideological messages?
Well, I do think that I would never argue that games have a responsibility to send positive messages. I think that, like with novels, with movies, with any genre you can think of where stories are matter, the game should serve the best interests of the story, and in games that involves play mechanics and stuff like that. But yeah, there are a lot of really positive messages being distributed, and I feel like more than like negative messages. And even games that get a bad rap for sending negative messages, like the Grand Theft Auto series, for instance, kind of subverts what you think. You play through like the entire Grand Theft Auto series, and there's kind of a crime doesn't pay kind of thing seeping out, and it's more about how disturbing America is as an empire than it is about how cool it is to jack people and steal their stuff, although that is really cool.
Right, and I know that happens in film too, because I know Train Spotting. In the movie Train Spotting, there's a lot of terrible drugs, and then during that time, Bob Dole was running for president, and he spent a lot of his time talking about how terrible Train Spotting was and how it glorified drugs, where if you watched that movie, you would never want to do those drugs in your life. Just don't make assumptions about what you think the message of a game is.
I love when politicians talk about games because they're always so lagged. Like they're still talking about Splatterhouse and Mortal Kombat and things like that. Kim, do you think that people, like when they're buying these popular games and they're playing the games, do they really pay attention to the messages, or does most of that just tend to go over their head?
Well, I personally absorb the messages, and I think on a shallow level, people who don't play games, like politicians, will look at a game with guns in it and be like, it's pro-guns, it's guns. But like Brett said, like Roger Ebert, a long time ago, he addressed Congress and Bob Dole about reading only on the surface level of these movies. You know, there's guns, a cop does get killed in this movie, but it's not about glorifying guns and glorifying cop killing. You're not reading into it, and you're getting the wrong assumptions.
It's tough though, because these games are trying to tell you something. The story of Bioshock, for at least until I stopped paying attention, it's trying to tell you something. Have you ever tried to tell someone a story while they're playing a video game? You just get a lot of and then they're going to shoot something else. So what you try to convey, you don't know if that's fully conveyed to the person playing the game. You know that those cut scenes that happen in between, where it's like, Booker, let me explain what the hell's going on. That is such a tiny portion of the overall gameplay experience, and it's super important. But most of your time is like, oh God, I just wish I could shoot that dude in the heart.
Well, if you look at game completion rates, and there's like stats, there's actually been a lot of discussion in the last couple of weeks about like the rate at which people are completing certain games, and it looks like the games that have a higher like story meaning content have a higher rate of completion. Like your Call of Duties and games like that, people are not interested in whether, you know, William Fichtner or whatever has voiceover, but Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect had like 58% completion rate. Heavy Rain, I don't know if you guys played that, which I will also single out as a game that I think has an awesome portrayal of people and an awesome thing for people to take away from it. Also has like 78%, I think, if I'm getting it right. So it seems like when the game gives players more meat to chew on, they tend to chew on it.
I love that thanks to the Xbox achievements and also Steam, we can see how far people get into games. Like I love when they'll show like, you know, a new game will come out and like 10% of people don't finish the first chapter. Like, why did you buy the game if you're not going to play it?
It depends on other features in the game. Like if it's just an
I
awesome
suppose they're not playing the single player.
It's just like screw it. I won't get as much enjoy. But that's also like the social ramifications. Like some games serve a great purpose of getting us all to be friends. And work together to a goal, and that has merit in itself. But there's a different kind of game, like Bioshock. Something that resonates with me more is going and living out the story. That and like God of War. I remember I played the first God of War, and I'm like, I love it. It's like, who is Kratos and why is he here? Meantime,
why can't he use contractions?
I'm gonna, you know, wrist axe people for 45 minutes until I find out more.
Well, the narrative, I think, is what makes you get so attached and so willing to further this character's goal, who may be someone you relate to who's completely different. Like I play as male characters all the time, and I think, oh, I got to get my wife back. That's not something I would personally do, but I get so involved with the story. I get so involved with the story that I have to make this happen, and I think it's really beautiful that you get to get to see this different point of view and live in this environment and be really immersed in it.
Yeah. Okay, let me talk to you structurally. So we're talking specifically about video games. They're different from books. They're different from movies because they're a collaborative experience. It's not just giving you something, you're giving something back and sometimes changing the story. So it strikes me as more difficult, I think, inherently to tell a story, to portray a particular message in a video game, because as you said, you just want to shoot things. Like, for instance, BioShock has a story, but it also has to be a game, and many people's criticism of it is that, would it have been better if it did not involve so much violence, so much killing? Did it need that to tell the story? Like, it's hard to tell a message, perhaps, of like, you know, violence doesn't solve everything in a modern warfare game, because inherently there's going to be a lot of pulling the trigger. So do you think that, for instance, Ross, do you think that maybe indie developers might be better able to subvert genre expectations and get across messages that way?
Well, budget's an issue in that case. Like especially like the Kickstarter level, those guys are dealing with such ridiculously lower budgets that they're not able to do like fancy cutscenes and stuff like that. If you want to tell a story, you're going to need millions of dollars. So for indie developers, they're having to tell simpler stories, and oftentimes one of the reasons those games tend to be such like throwbacks to the Nintendo era is because they can create goal-oriented games with aesthetic elements like soundtrack or puzzles that give you a sense of completion that you would get from a narrative story without having to spend $1 billion on voice actors. So I don't think that they can, but that's not because they're not awesome, it's because they're working with a different set of tools. I think the really great points are going to have to be made. You want AAA versus AAA, not indie versus AAA.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, another sort of structural difference is that you have single-player gaming and you have multiplayer gaming, and it seems to me, and maybe you can come up with some examples where this isn't the case, where it's one thing to tell a story, to portray a message in a BioShock single-player experience. It's harder to do it in a match of League of Legends or in a Call of Duty match or something like that. And it at least seems like multiplayer games are becoming much more popular now. So I wonder if gaming is sort of being hamstrung by the popularity of this one component of it.
Right. Well, I think there's still a lot of legwork that goes on. Like I talked to the guys from Riot who'd make League of Legends, and the amount of work they put into the backstory and actually setting up the framework and the geographical breakdowns of what creates the wars that are being fought in any situation, and you know what family got broken up years ago that's now creating this thing. You know, and I think it allows. It casts as wide a net as possible because it gives you the opportunity as a player to say, fuck it, just skip through, I'm going to play, versus, all right, I want to immerse myself in this entire story and narrative that you've crafted. And I think you end up getting the longer term fans from the people who immerse themselves versus the ones who are just like, I just want to shoot a bunch of people with spells.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that people are trying, like Dishonored, for instance, or BioShock Infinite. There's a lot of story elements that are told through what are essentially like fetch quests throughout the game. Like you look around for like snippets of exposition.
But that's in it.
Right, exactly. You have an interesting way of like integrating gameplay with story in a way that makes it flow much more organically than just switching to a cutscene. Anyway, yeah.
I love that you brought up Dishonored, by the way, because one of the most common and obvious criticisms of games is, oh, they're just so violent. All they want to do is encourage you to kill. Like GTA, you're just killing prostitutes the whole time. But Dishonored, of course, is one of the games where it offers you the opportunity to, if you want to be violent, you can. If you want to be perfectly non-violent, you can't. And there's a history of games like that. The Thief series, to some extent, the Hitman series. I mean, you inevitably need to kill somebody.
Yeah.
But you don't need to go in, both barrels, guns blazing, whatever.
Going way back to the old Sierra games, Heroes Quest. You go through and you choose if you want to be a thief or a soldier, someone with a sword, or if you want to sneak around, and it completely changes your experience of that game.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you said that you pay, Kim, in particular, you pay attention to message and you pay attention to that sort of thing. Do you think that as more and more people become familiar with games, they experience games, the gap between a gamer and a non-gamer sort of goes away? Do you think that over time, people will just see it as naturally another area like movies, like music,
just
like literature?
Just like another medium?
Exactly, to get across whatever ideological or social message you want.
I think it's a really unique medium because it's one where you spend hours and hours immersed in this world and you're actively controlling it, but generally you will lead to the same outcome. I think it's a fantastic medium. It's probably my favorite one. So yeah.
Okay, and you said that you can identify lots of good messages that comes out of games. I'm glad that you brought up Dishonored. Do you have any other examples of games that...
The Mass Effect series is the first one that pops up. Forgetting the controversy over the end of Mass Effect 3, I can't think of a single series, at least in the last few years, that has done more to make women and men gamers an equal part, because you can do either a male or female Commander Shepard, positive portrayals of gay people, and not only positive, but like matter of fact, like this is just normal.
Yeah.
On a weird sociopathic level, the Saints Row series, starting with 2, I'm not kidding, by the way. Yes, you're still a ruthless criminal lord, killing people and going and prostituting yourself and all that, but the fact that they made it possible for, they hired 3 different voice actors for women, 3 different voice actors for men for the player character, which really like gives women a chance to experience that kind of open world thing without, with not censored, not like dumbed down, not like made it all girly-fied. You can just get the same experience, but you can get an experience that's closer to you. And even though the message of that game is indefensible, but the inclusiveness of it on that level is something that I really am enthused about.
Everyone gets the purple thing.
Right, exactly. Everyone can get the dildo bat. Everyone can get the Apocryphists.
Gotta play this game.
It's awesome.
The one I missed out on.
Yeah. And once again, you bring up a great example when you're talking about the sexuality in Mass Effect. I would also bring up like Dragon Age.
Right, yes.
You wouldn't expect that video games would be all that progressive when it comes to sexuality, considering the target audience, but they are making slow, steady steps. Now, in practice, it usually just results in people watching pixelated lesbians have sex, but they're also including gay characters as well, like in Bully, for instance.
Yep.
And I think that that's another area where the message of games is becoming more tolerant, more progressive.
You even get an achievement if you kiss a number of boys in Bully. On the it's.
I like the development, because I played GTA 4 for a long time, and just in games like that where like when a gay character emerges, okay, big success. However, it will start out as like the worst stereotype of a homosexual that anyone has ever come up with, and then it'll develop into something more sophisticated over time. But I do like the steps.
I like how they just kind of threw it in there in Borderlands 2, like, oh, Sir Hammerlock is gay, whatever, you know, and a bunch of other incidental characters, like this female researcher's wife is missing, and it just like it doesn't even matter. It's just
They didn't feel the need to put a scooter chase through a park, for instance, like in GTA. So that's unfortunately all the time we have for this topic. We're going to take another short break. When we come back with our final segment, we're going to be looking to the future of games, the future of the people designing games. We'll be back shortly.
The School of Game Design at the Academy of Art University is one of the top game design schools in the nation.
It's important to make a great game first.
Our graduates hit the ground running and can work at the best gaming companies in the world. Call 1-800-544-ARTS, academyart.edu. Academy of Art University, jobs for the 21st century.
So there you see another commercial, this time for a course in game design. This is becoming increasingly popular and common, both at for-profit colleges like the one in that commercial, but also at public and private colleges around the country. USC, which is not far from where we're filming, offers courses in game design. It's becoming popular, and I think, obviously, because people want to break into this industry that they're very interested in. So the first question I'm going to throw to you, Ross, do you think, in your experience, whether anecdotally or from your time in games journalism, is this a good way to get into the industry, or are these people possibly wasting their time and money?
The part of me that's been gaming for way longer than I'm willing to admit kind of doesn't want it to be, because so much of like game developers, especially people that right now are like titans of the industry, came up through modding, came up through like teaching themselves. Like one of the main guys behind Dishonored, for instance, basically taught himself how to do video game design, and then met a lot of the people who are currently working on the first Deus Ex, and that's how he broke in. And of course, there's Counter-Strike and all those other stories. So I would hate to see the formalization of the training process weed out the ability of people who show an aptitude for it to break in. But at the same time, I mean, a targeted vocational education is really, really useful, especially for highly technical fields, which video games are. So I don't see it as a problem, except in the case of like Art Academy of San Francisco, which is like the DeVry of art schools. University of Phoenix, that's a sucker's game. That's just milk you and we promise you'll be the next, Carmack or whatever.
I love this commercial because it's like, cool design games. Look at this girl's butt holding a gun. We will bring her in there and make her stand on a stage while you watch.
Yep. While playing thumping club music.
Yes, there's a club atmosphere here at Academy of Art.
That's a school song. So.
Yeah, I've programmed. I don't recall much of that happening from my time in programming.
Hail, Academy of Art College. Butt girl with a gun.
You look like you want to jump in.
I actually saw a news piece based on a woman who got a degree in game design from the Academy or Art Institute in Florida. And she called her degree like useless, a waste of $70,000. No one would give her a job, and she ended up being a stripper.
Yeah, that happens to 90% of the people that go to the schools.
Yeah, to any school.
They don't say that in the commercial for some reason.
No,
honestly,
they
God, my
obviously
political science degree.
oversell how easy it is for you to get a job after.
Or the value of the degree.
How it's generally going to be a lower wage job, and
but that is,
I don't mean to demonize all specialized education, but Art Institute is 40% owned by Goldman Sachs. What do you think is going to fucking
so
happen?
are most things.
No.
Yeah.
I just think that holds not just for people to go to these schools, that goes to every school, because it's like, oh gosh, I went and got my degree in American Ballet Studies, and that didn't translate to a job. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
At least this one you can come away with tangible skills.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think that's what's interesting. You brought this up, Ross, about how there are a lot of skills that can be trained in this field, and it's sort of different from other fields. Like, you don't expect that the person that's going to write the next New York Times bestseller is going to have a PhD in English literature, or is going to have studied music theory or something like that. And what's interesting is, I don't know how much you learn in a few years at the DeVry of game design or whatever, but I have to imagine that those skills actually would help. But I also imagine that game developers probably feel the same way that you do, that we want the next big modder or something like that. And I wonder, will it take a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades for that culture to sort of work itself out? Or maybe it'll be lingering, I don't know.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the PhD in literature. One of the things that I'm not a huge fan of, like, current state of American literature, and there seems to be an awful lot of, like, Iowa or the Ivy League sort of funneling in who gets to be like the Pulitzer Prize winning novelist or whatever. I would cry if that happens to video games. I feel like we'd end up with nothing but video games about people's affairs and divorces and what it's like to be like a wrestling coach in New England. I want some of that immaturity that led to some of the awful sexist behavior. I still want, boob jokes and punching stuff through walls and dildo bats, and I feel like modders are more likely to bring that kind of like lack of conscience to game design.
From what I've seen of Skyrim mods so far, there's a lot of that actually. It seems like every female celebrity, if we can just make her naked and get her in this game, people will upvote my mod. But generally, we're talking about who we think is going to be making these games. But games are going to be made in the future. What would you guys like to see in games in the future? Either technologically, story-wise, genre-wise. Do you want to see expectations subverted in some way?
I want to see a game with no violence in it that teaches a blissful message of peace and harmony, and no one will play it, and I'll be the best in the world.
You want to be number one?
Just be me. I'll be the only one playing it.
Farmville, huge hit.
Farmville, huge hit. But I feel like that's its own version of a game. I like games like that. I like games where you're just sitting there. Like, I played Theme Park because I was trying to get
Tiny Tower.
Yeah, like stupid crap. My girlfriend's like, first of all, I can't believe while playing this game I did have a girlfriend. But she's like, you realize that there's no skill involved. You're just sitting there and you're doing things, and it's giving you little pellets in Farmville, and it's giving you food. Like, it really is giving you a food pellet. And you're building it up. It's just that feeling of nurturing something and building it up, and it was
strange
all fake.
The word game at that point. Like, if an alert comes in and you're supposed to click it when the alert comes up, you have to wonder, is that actually a game? But then, how different is that from Modern Warfare? A head comes around a corner, I shoot it. Is that really any different?
Well, it tries to get away. Like, a lot of these games, it keeps you there, building up level. Like, you got to level 4, and that didn't take very long. And you got to level 8, and it was just a little longer. And then you're tired, because I did this on Temple Run 2 on my phone. I got to the part where it's like, get 10 billion more meters, and we'll get you past. And you're just like, screw it, I want to see what the next level is. So I'm going to pay you $4 for 1 billion fake coins.
Yeah. What about you? What do you want to see in the future, Kim?
I think that's funny that you said that, because you were just complaining about Tiny Tower compulsively playing. I would like that to go away.
Those games?
Yes, and I would like, just this not really a game. I think we can do without them, like these social games. I think EA just pulled the plug on SimCity Social, so yay.
Do you think that they draw people in to play real games,
No,
however you want to define that?
I don't.
Do you think people just play those and then that's it?
I like using games as a legitimate entertainment medium. I mean, it's such a unique way to experience a story and be a part of it, and I really like that. I also think games have a power socially. For instance, I took a class in college where we studied games as the next social enclave, like going to a bar on Friday night could be staying in and gaming and chatting with your friends. I mean, I got my first job and my only serious boyfriend in an MMO. It's definitely has that potential to be more into a social life and more into your just
it's more all-encompassing than other forms of media, perhaps.
I feel like yes, because you do take an active role in it.
Yeah. What would you like to see, Ross?
A couple of things. The first would just be I'd like to see the video game development cycle split from the adherence to quarterly earnings reports. I feel like there's been I won't name any games, but I feel like there's been a couple of games in the last couple of years that have been rushed out by major developers specifically to meet, like, we need this to come out before the end of Q4. I don't care if you're done, fucking get it done. And pardon my French. And then the game's rushed out and with incomplete assets, with a lot of fans feeling really disappointed. I would just love to see games get made on the schedule, kind of like film in a way, you know, maybe have a blockbuster season, like, okay, May to August is when we're gonna get your Grand Theft Autos and your Call of Duties, and then like in December you'll get, you know, Good Will Hunting the game or something like that. The other thing is just a wish list. Someday what I want is for like this would make Connect actually useful. Release a game kind of like a role-playing game with like dialogue wheels and stuff like that. Have the player actually speak the lines of dialogue to motivate the plot. That's it. That'd be a lot of fun.
What I'm worried about in the future of games, and I think that this is not just true in games, it's many areas of our society I believe are being ruined by information. There's too much information, there's too much quantifying of things, and I see this happening in games. So I play shooters and I play League of Legends, which if you don't know is just a competitive MOBA game. And in League of Legends it ranks you. It says you're gold or you're silver or you're bronze. And in first-person shooters it tells you what your kill-to-death ratio is. And I feel like back in the day we didn't have that information. I didn't know how good or how bad I was at Quake. It's like playing pickup basketball. You play for the fun of it. But now we're being quantified and we're being ranked in ways that I think is ruining the fun of these experiences. People play these games and they feel like if I'm not advancing in rank or if I'm not making my KDA ratio become better, I'm not having fun. And I think that we assumed that the information would make the experience more enriching and more full, and I think that we're ruining a very advanced and progressive and great form of entertainment. So I'm worried about that.
Do you think other people are like you in that respect? Or
I see a lot of people on the League of Legends subreddit complaining about I'm stuck where I'm at in my rank and people are ruining these games for me. I can't advance. They don't enjoy the actual matches anymore.
Well, this is a throwback to like the classic arcade days when you would have like the high scores for games, and that kind of competitiveness is sort of a, you know, in the DNA.
So you're saying that's always been there, actually?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's a good point.
And damn you, MCF. How long were you there?
You will die.
Yeah. I actually just saw the episode of Seinfeld where he's trying to keep his Frogger score going.
Yep.
Okay, so more future stuff. Games are going to be coming out in the near future. There must be some that you have your eyes on. Let's set ourselves up for failure. Let's predict which games are going to be awesome that end up not being so good.
I already set myself up for failure by getting so excited for Star Wars 1313. Thank you, LucasArts.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. Okay, another political move by Disney, shutting it down, or at least outsourcing the game development. Is there anything you're looking for?
I just want the next Grand Theft Auto. I'm just going to use that and play and ruin my life for a while. And then get really mad at not having enough structure in my life and then go back and play God of War 2 again or something.
Yeah. What about you, Ross?
Actually, Saints Row 4. Which I'm hoping is going to be great, but I'm set up. I'm preparing myself. It feels like they're really rushing it out, but if it has dildo bats and zombies, then I think I'll be happy.
That actually also is one of the things on Batman's utility belt.
Yeah, that doesn't get as much play in the comics.
Warner Brothers killed it.
That reminds me, the next installment in the Arkham series I'm excited about, even though I don't know anything about it. I like the other two.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on what you said, and it's actually for political reasons that I'm highly anticipating the next GTA game, because no matter what, if it's good, if it's bad, if it's overly violent, if it's not, politicians are going to use it in their speeches about games, and so I think that the value of the storyline, like how good of a story is it? Like GTA 4 told a great story, and I think it opened people's eyes to the value of this particular form of entertainment.
I think that game remains the definitive satire of the Bush years. I mean, in any genre, literary, movies, anything. Especially like Republican Space Rangers, and I love it. So I agree.
Yeah. So I'm worried. I hope that they don't make it too easy for politicians to pick it apart and to frame gamers as a subversive part of society. But I want it to be fun. Maybe some dildo bats.
Yeah.
How do you think that things like Grand Theft Auto and BioShock now make that leap? Because there's a bunch there's definitely a leap. It's out there. I know that BioShock is different because I'm not that big a gamer at all, and I played Grand Theft Auto and I got BioShock because there were tons of commercials about it and people were talking about it.
So you're susceptible to advertising.
Do you think it's just advertising that made BioShock such a huge success? Because there's a difference. So that's the question. Yes, I personally am susceptible to advertising, but a lot of people are jumping in on that.
Well, advertising matters. I mean, it works, but advertising will get people in on the first day, but advertising won't keep sales, won't keep a movie evergreen. Word of mouth is what's going to keep something really good. So if the quality is there, the advertising just helps people notice it.
Yeah, and people love writing negative reviews. So if a game gets overhyped and it turns out to be bad, that's an easy day at the games journalism studio, I guess. But I think, at least in regard to that, I think that you see the screenshot of Booker, she's hiding behind him. There are essential parts of stories. You see that screenshot, you know what you're in for, and I think that that's inherently appealing, I think. But I guess we'll see in the future what happens with video games. I'm glad that we were able to have this discussion. There's so much more we could have talked about, and I'm sure that people will fault us for it in the comments. But I had fun at least, and I want to thank you guys for joining us. So for each of you, where can people see more of your content?
You can watch Pop Trigger on the network, the Young Turks network, and then also you can tune into TV Guide specials that I'm going to be on basically every Monday at 9 for the next however many weeks.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact subjects, but they sounded very interesting. What are you going to be covering?
Worst movie or best movie sequels, star-making roles for certain people, and then other ones coming down the line are like biggest movie hunks and babes.
I know you're excited for that one.
And other similar fare.
Okay, Kim Horcher, where can people see more of your work?
Well, you can find me right here on the TYT network at youtube.com/nerdalert, where we cover gaming, technology, science,
dinosaurs,
culture.
Yeah.
Dinosaurs I put in science.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, and Ross, where can people read more of your work?
Gamefront.com, and also you can follow me on Twitter at Ross A. Lincoln, and every time I write something, I will spam you with it. So.
Okay, so I'm John Iderola, if anybody at this point still doesn't know that. Just filling in for Anna for this week. Don't worry, she will be back soon. If you'd like to see more of me for some reason, you can feel free to head to youtube.com/TYT University. We've got videos coming out every day. If there's something you feel like we should have talked about in these videos or you'd like to see in a future episode of The Point, feel free to talk about it in the comments. You can tweet Anna, you can tweet Malcolm if you feel like it. And thank you for watching The Point.